we're in C1, that's true. Is that working? Yes. Yeah, cool, amazing. Okay. And right now the clicker's not working. And the slideshow's not working. So I don't know what needs to happen there. It's a little and that. Okay, so I just need to that
You do a little click. Yeah.
Yeah. Good deal. All right. I think we're ready to get started. So I know we're a small but intimate group, but for the sake of those joining us on Zoom World, we will stick with our technology plan. So thank you all. I'm Amy Lan and I direct the campus writing program at the University of Missouri, which yes, this is the home of our writing program on campus in Columbia, Missouri. It's a good place to be, and I have a wonderful group of people I get to work with each day. But today we're here as a panel to talk about WAC's transnational role in one program's institutional success, a short history of how the University of Missouri's WAC program internationalizes its mission. And so we are going to share some perspectives historically about the program, up to more current times, as well as some current research that has just been completed. So little history, little research, a little bit of everything. So I want to just do a quick introduction. Again, myself as director of the writing program and also associate professor in English education, so in our College of Education. And then also you'll get to hear from Dr. Marty Townsend, who is professor emerita in the English department and has been our director in the writing program before me by a few years, and is my mentor in this work. And then Dr. Maha Karim, who I'm so excited to get to announce she completed her dissertation and has been our graduate research assistant in the program now for a few years, and she will be our closing speaker. So we, on Zoom, if we have some people that want to just in the chat share your name and university, but it would be great too for our group here in the room to shout out your name and university. So let's start over here and then move over here. So name and university. Wonderful. And your name?
Rose.
Thank you.
I'm Beth Carroll from Appalachian State University.
Louis Ford, University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. All right, so we are ready to dive into these three topics. So Marty will talk about WAC program internationalization in a response to the administrator's call. I'll be talking about building on those international communities of practice around WAC-WID. And then Maha will share Iraqi graduate students' perceptions of academic writing in the STEM fields. So, Marty.
Well, a special welcome to the hardy folks who showed up after that exquisite lunch. If you're suffering from irremediable jet lag, we'll understand if you close your eyelids from moment to moment. When our state flagship universities, provost and later chancellor, announced in a university-wide forum that for MU, University of Missouri, to become a truly great university, it must be an international university. And he uttered those words in a widely public forum in 1994. We grabbed right a hold of them. We saw not simply an opportunity, but a necessity to grow beyond our then current boundary of providing writing intensive support for faculty and students. At that time, we had already established our institutional bona fides on our 30,000 student campus We were successfully providing 350 writing intensive courses per year so that our students could graduate on time with their writing intensive requirement. Our faculty had the backing needed to create the WI curriculum that would best serve their majors, and further, graduate students in the disciplines, including international graduate students, were prepared to assist faculty and students in achieving writing and critical thinking ability in their major fields. All of these programs' elements are ongoing, of course. They never stop. The work is never finished. That simply is what we do all day, every day. Still, 8 years after the start of our program, we had established ourselves well enough that we could respond to Provost Deaton's call for international collaboration, cooperation, partnership, and research in WAC. This panel shows how we embrace an international focus and how doing so benefits our programs. We offer this perspectives of 3 panelists, former and current program directors, and the program's current graduate research assistant, who share how our teaching, research, and administration respond to our then provost's call for internationalization and how it helps position us for the future. Having joined Campus Writing Program in 1991, I became what would be the program's permanent, long-serving program director. And so Provost Deaton's declaration that MU would need to become an international university was happy news to me. We had undergone a highly successful external program review. Thank you, Lynn White and Ed Bloom. I just transposed those names. Lynn, this is going to be great to our online participants. Thank you, Ed White and Lynn Bloom. Our short and long-term programmatic activities were reasonably well established. Our staff were well acclimated to the responsibilities, and the campus, this is key, had accepted the WI requirement as a stable component of the university's curriculum. With regard then to an international focus, we began simply by accepting invitations as they happened to come to us and to respond to already funded grants to exchange faculty with other universities. We started with a university in Romania, one that was only 8 years out at that time from communist control for over 50 years. And our provost, who was a political science professor, had written a US government grant to simply exchange faculty back and forth between the 2 universities. The agenda, of course, was to talk about higher education, talk about our disciplines, talk about our research, get to know a new cohort of faculty on completely new grounds, and let them talk to us about what they were doing. The instructions were about that broad when I went to Romania. I kept asking Jeff Chin, but what do you want me to do? And he kept saying, just go have coffee with them. Just sit down in their offices and talk to them. Nothing formal, just go visit with them and get to know them. And for me, it's not hard to talk to people, and it's not hard to get them to talk to me. I loved doing it. We were required to be there for at least a month. And by the end of my month there, in fact, before the end of my month, we had secured permission for my handler. It was the first and only time I've ever had a handler, and I loved it. Somebody in charge of me, moving me about, say, go here, go there. Here's where you don't go and don't get lost. We had secured permission for her to come back to our campus. And initially she would have been there for a month, but because I offered to house her in our home, she could stay longer. More of her money could go to sustaining her instead of housing her. By the end of her 6 weeks living with me and my family, Nicoletta Rayanu had been accepted to work for her doctoral degree in our English department. And her family was ready to move to Columbia the following year. The vice provost's objectives were well met in my 1995 visit, in securing Nicoletta's permission to come to stay with us and her family as well. I want to show a few slides which give just a quick timeline and overview of what we did. Show me what button to push.
This one right here.
Oh, yep. I hope this one doesn't have an attitude. This is just a representative list of where we went in those very early years after we accepted the provost's call. Our first visit was to the University of Sibiu. Yeah, it is. I just was finding my place. Our next call was to South Korea. Again, a faculty member at MU had written a grant to exchange colleagues. Our third visit to Prince of Sangkla University in Thailand, a return visit in 2001. The president of that university asked me if I would come back and if I would bring a colleague to run a 2-week workshop for faculty on the island of Phuket. That's the equivalent of Europe's Hawaii. Of course we would go. We'd be glad to hold a 2-week workshop on the beach practically. And then that one paid forth again by having one of their people come to us, stay with us for a while, and come separately to the US to present at a couple of conferences that we put together. It really paid off bigly, as one of our notable politicians would say. We work our way down through several others, and I concentrated on Southeast Asia as I pulled these examples together. There were a few others, but our last one on that list is Joseph's colleagues from Hong Kong Polytechnic University, who invited Amy in some years, me in some years, other colleagues in some other years to attend and present at the English Across the Curriculum conference that Joe's collaborated with her on. We've been going back and forth together, these 3 universities, Joseph's and Julia Chen's. She is one of our keynote speakers at this conference for ever since, what was your first year, Amy?
2011.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was after mine. At any rate, this is just a representative example. And surprisingly, none of these were formally proposed or formally conceived to be anything long term. They were just an informal response, if you would say, of work that others had already done. It didn't take a great deal of effort on our part to put these visits together.
They're giving you an attitude name.
Yep, one more.
Okay, let's just do this.
Does that work? Yep. Okay. So it didn't move. There we are. We did that one. You need to go one ahead. And then this is just a representative list of people that we hosted. From one of the exchanges to China, we hosted 2 women scholars for a full calendar year from the Northwest University of Agriculture and Forestry. This might, I should point out the not so good with the real good. this might be called one of the return visits that failed, in that this university wanted one of our people to come to them and teach there for a while. And so I wrote a curriculum that wasn't accepted. And I was asked if I would revise it. And the revision wasn't accepted. But I was never communicating or corresponding with the senior administrators who were judging whether I would come, and if I did, what I would teach and what I would do. Sad to say that after multiple revisions, I wasn't somehow giving them what they wanted, and they ultimately did not understand WAC, despite the intercession of Li Gao and Liping Wang, who were mediating. And what I finally figured out was that they wanted me to come over there to teach their students how to talk and write in English. They didn't want any of this WAC, work with the faculty stuff. And I finally gave up, and the communication just stopped. Zhang Wei from Nankai University in China came. I met her because she translated for me when I was there initially. I asked to do a research project while I was there, and she translated for me my research questions to the faculty and then retranslated the answers back to me in English. Laxmi Chi was from Prince of Sangha University. She went back and forth multiple times, staying as long as a semester, but coming for as short as the Four Seas Conference the year we met in Chicago. And then Chonam National University in South Korea is an ongoing partnership that Campus Writing Program didn't have anything to do with developing. It's been in existence for years at MU, and we just got to kind of latch onto it. We hosted 2 international conferences. Technology with attitudes. The 2004 WAC conference in St. Louis is the one that Art Young mentioned in his lunchtime keynote. It wasn't called an international WAC conference because we had never done it before. And the committee overseeing us didn't want to call it that until they knew how it worked out. And so it was simply the 7th National WAC Conference. And the very next one, which we had 10% of our participants come from beyond our borders. So when Clemson hosted the next year, they called it the 8th International WAC Conference. And then the Literacies of Hope Conference in Beijing, Amy, you were a part of that. That was organized and pulled together by a scholar at a university in Beijing who had had contact with one of our education professors, Roy Fox, who invited us to collaborate, and we did. And we recruited a number of people from the US to go with us, and there were a few of them at this conference. I see you shaking your head and smiling, Amy, because I know you're thinking something about this one. What do you want to say? Or what did I catch you smiling about that you don't want to say?
So that conference, and I'll mention it briefly next, but it was a good way for us to come together as this very international team. Even though we were all converging in China, we were coming from all over, and talk about just a great way when we think of interdisciplinary work creating sparks, which is what a previous provost used to say. It was also a time, I think, too, where some of those sparks, but in such a good way. So Literacies of Hope, but there certainly were stories too. And Mutiny on the Buses moments is one of the things I'm laughing about, but that's a question for Marty at a later time.
And I'll leave it go until a later time. There are always good stories that come out of these collaborations. And then just a few representative publications that have come out of some of this work. The one from 2002 is published in Language and Literature Across the Disciplines, which has since undergone a name change, I think. And this was from my time at Nanking, when I interviewed a cadre of Chinese professors about what they did with writing in their classes. And Zhang Wei was the young woman who translated. She was our handler there for the whole group. She translated to and from English and Chinese for a solid week for me. We owed her something in return, and she came and had a year-long graduate assistantship. The second article on there, Terry Zawacki and I wrote on her beautiful patio in the springtime, drinking Prosecco, as I recall. And it told the story somewhat of Terry's and my crisscrossing China one summer. We kept going back and forth, always close to each other, but never meeting up in a city to have a conversation. My point with showing you this brief agenda, and it is excerpts and examples, is that there wasn't anything really terribly pre-planned or formal about it. All of these things just kind of evolved because people wanted to meet. They wanted to talk about some mutual areas of interest. We all found it worthwhile and interesting. And so we kept doing it. And here we are at Clemson in 2013. That's 23.
2023.
2023, I missed it by a decade. Okay, we'll talk more.
All right. So I thought it was perfect that Kathleen's lunch talked about that intertwining pieces of growth, because that is very much the metaphor I would see from what Kathleen shared and then what Marty has shared and what I wanted to then kind of interrogate a little bit during this next section. So when we think about all these things that Marty's talked about, to me, it really does show what happens when we form these communities of practice, and especially around WAC with. And so we know as WAC scholars, we see that that communicating work that we do, it is a sign of learning. We see learning, we see understanding. We also know that it is that writing to learn, communicating to learn that is happening. And that happens in a context of place and time and people. And that's what we just got to see, a wonderful historical timeline of how those international opportunities were happening. And again, creating that community of practice. But it also builds on what we know about professional learning. And that is very much as a WAC program director, I'm very much interested year-round in what are we doing to support our faculty in learning about WAC with. And that professional learning happens in that collaborative environment. And so what I've seen through these examples that Marty has shared are places where we are bringing in that collaboration as we work with our colleagues all across. That forming a community of practice, something that I've also seen is that it is recognizing then the places when we go there, we then have a tangible way to experience parts of the social, cultural, historical, institutional situations. So a lot of this comes down to what I would say, and Marty said it as well, accepting those invitations that when we are asked, we say yes. And we look for those opportunities. And so when we hosted jointly this literacy conference in 2007 in Beijing, for me, that was a critical moment. I was just completing my dissertation. I had been working very closely with fellow graduate students, especially from China. And so it was a really interesting time though to start thinking of that transition myself from doctoral student into faculty position, and how was that international community very much a part of my practice all the way through, from the beginning of my doctoral work and then on. So that 2007 Literacies of Hope conference was that first time to really say yes to that kind of invitation, to step out of my comfort zone into a new opportunity to learn with other scholars. Then jumping ahead to 2016, you'll notice a similar institution, and that was the Prince of Songkla University in Thailand. And that one was interesting because, like Marty, I got to go there and spend a couple of weeks teaching workshops on writing across the curriculum, what it is, what it looks like, taking faculty and graduate students through some of the learning opportunities that we provide our faculty at MU. But it also gave opportunities to meet with faculty individually for writing conferences about their writing,
to hear about their experiences. And that was something that I've really tried to foster in our program at MU is if we're going to be teachers with writing and of writing in our discipline, who are we also as writers in our discipline and writers in our fields? And so working on that was just a wonderful way to learn about some of the writing experiences that our colleagues at Prince of Songkla were having. And at that point, then I saw that I was a co-learner very much with them, learning about what were the issues they're tackling and exploring and understanding. Very different from my own in Missouri. And yet there were ways we were sharing. What it comes down to is how are students learning and engaging and becoming part of their professional disciplines. So we accept those invitations. And we also started to see more and more that our own faculty and our writing intensive courses, our campus writing board members, they were also seeking opportunities, accepting invitations. And so one in particular, Rainer Glaser, was on the board and a chemistry professor at MU. He and I spent part of a summer, he was going about every summer to China to teach. Even though he's a chemist, he is very much a WAC scholar. And so he loves to get into assignment design and pedagogy of writing across the curriculum. So he and I would be teaching and then also doing workshops, and they were covering a range of everything from a couple days to a few weeks. So it was those opportunities I realized that, again, what an opportunity we have as WAC directors and leaders to work with our colleagues in the disciplines. So from that going out opportunity, we also were seeing, and Marty showed also, it's that on-campus opportunity that we have in our programs. When we get to have a community of practice that we're forming at home, and again, through workshops and courses where we're asked to join with international partners and centers on campus, working with, again, what we all seem to share, and that is this interest in writing and how do we support writing. So one of those partnerships we've had, I think since my first year in 2011 is with the College of Engineering. And that's just one of many, but they have so many international graduate students as well as faculty. And I will say that one of my first things I did when I took on the role as director was to read Marty Patton's research, her study with engineering. And so her book was instrumental too in me thinking about how we make this partnership, this community of practice with our colleagues. And so that has become important, as you're going to find out a little bit more from Maha in just a bit. But I'll end my part with just that importance of saying yes to these invitations has been really important. But it also now, after I've been doing this since 2011, to think about where am I now extending invitations? Where and with whom and how can I keep building these communities of practice? But Maha is going to take us now into a deeper look at College of Engineering and what that experience has looked like. So, Maha.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maha Khadim Karim. I'm originally from Iraq. I taught English and English literature at the University of Baghdad College of Languages. I came to the US through an assistantship through the College of Engineering at Mizzou. And the reason for that, because I'm English and engineering, what's the connection, was I was the director of a scholarship program back in Iraq where we are sending a lot of graduate and undergraduate students to the US for the first time since 2003. So because Iraq needed scholars to go to the US, Australia, and England, and then bring back that knowledge to Iraq after being sanctioned for years and years. So I worked with the College of Engineering for about 5 years, and of course Amy was my advisor. I recently graduated with my PhD like in May. She approached me and said that the College of Engineering wanted a workshop for their graduate students because it seems that they had some issues with their writing, especially academic writing. So she suggested, why not just, do this intensive program, of course, with her support. So we decided to do a 2 weeks writing intensive workshop, specifically focusing on an academic writing. And through that 2 weeks workshop, I communicated with those students We did do one-on-one feedback. I looked at some of their writing, and this is where this idea, this research came from. Why not look at these students' academic writing, look at their experiences, and maybe look at what kind of challenges these students face. Now, I chose Iraqi students specifically because this kind of population was aloof from since 1990, 2003, you know, about the war in Iraq and the sanctions and so on and so forth. There were not a lot of research about this population. So this is why I specifically chose Iraqi students. So the purpose of this study is it seeks to explore students' perceptions of their writing to understand their academic writing experiences. So I'm looking at their experiences in the past and then in their present program in the US.
This does get an attitude, doesn't it?
Okay.
Here, do you want me to try and I'll.
It's working fine.
There we go.
Oh, okay,
Very good.
okay. So my research questions are, what experiences shape multilingual STEM students' thinking about academic writing? How do students use strategies to help improve their writing skills? And what influences multilingual STEM students' identity as writers? Okay, there we go. The literature that informed my thinking about this specific research is the social cognitive theory, academic literacies, and disciplinary literacy. So I'm going to give just a brief review of the literature. I don't talk, focus on that. I would like to focus more on my findings. So from the social cognitive theory, I looked at the reciprocal interaction. So the aspect of how a person's social and academic environment influences their thinking of what a writer and writing mean. So those students didn't really believe they were writers, but researchers. Because of their academic context, because of the type of writing they did in science, they did not believe that they were writers. And the concept of the idea of self-efficacy and how modeling influences the way students write and their attitude towards writing, especially negative and positive modeling, and how it impacts graduate international STEM students' writing. I will talk about that in my findings. And then the academic literacy as well, this emerged as the number of international students, as well as, of course, local students, started to grow in higher education. Specifically, first, it started in the UK and then spread out in the US. So this growth led to the need for accommodating communities that were linguistically, socially, and culturally diverse, which really fits into the focus of the study. And then finally, disciplinary literacy. This is taken from Shannon's disciplinary literacy model, where it views literacy as a progression from basic to intermediate disciplinary literacy. Now I found that those students have disciplinary literacy, but they lack sometimes basic and intermediate literacy, just because they were really focused in their writing, in their discipline, not outside their discipline. And so the emphasis on the knowledge and ability possessed by those who create, communicate, and use knowledge within the discipline, which really fits into the context of this research. So the methodology was really a qualitative intrinsic case study, multiple bounded cases of participants studying in a doctoral program in the STEM fields at an R1 Midwest University. The participants were four Iraqi participants, 3 male and 1 female. Now the findings. So to answer the first question, what experiences shape multilingual STEM students thinking about academic writing? So experiences with academic writing instruction. I looked at the students' past and present prior experiences with academic writing. So the teaching of writing in their home context was really more of a traditional method that focused only on grammatical errors, memorizing sentences, structures, and drilling exercises. This is what I found with these 4 students. Now, STEM instructor, so when they came to the US, that same method continued. There were no really writing instructions, no really writing classes they took. The only writing classes actually I took were at the IEP, which is the Intensive English Program. And two of the participants said, one of them said that, yeah, it helped me to learn general English, but it really didn't help develop my academic writing. The other student, on the other hand, was like, no, I know, yeah, it's just basic English, but I want more academic writing. I don't know what academic writing is. I need that more. Let's see. So this is their experience with academic writing. They needed more academic writing instructions, specifically academic writing classes. They never took that in the past at their home country and not in their present institution. The only, as I remember, the only two of the participants mentioned the intensive writing program that we hosted at the engineering for 2 weeks. Now, the two participants who were in this research study said that workshop really helped us. Why? Because they knew the guidelines of how to write. What is an introduction? What is a conclusion? What's the methodology? What's the results? You imagine the grad students in the PhD program, they don't know these concepts on their journals. How do I write a journal? Who do I write it for? Like that kind of reader awareness. And then experiences with feedback on student writing. So students' academic writing improved when positive and constructive feedback is provided. Now, students shared 3 types of feedback that included constructive feedback, negative feedback, and blended feedback. Now, when we talk about feedback, yeah, they all received feedback. It's the way that they received that feedback. How was that feedback given to those students? So the role of feedback was one of the major themes that emerged in this study, especially for students who come from a classroom culture that looked at feedback as mere correction of errors. So their teachers back home only corrected grammar, gave them feedback without telling them why this is happening, why they changes this sentence or the phrase. Is just, go ahead and finish this sentence or finish this essay or finish this writing. Okay, so the type of feedback and the way it was provided is important, as it helps them understand their strengths and areas of weaknesses, which in turn helps them develop their writing skills. So I'll give you some examples. I quote from the students. One of the students, his name is Amin. This is the constructive feedback. So he said, in the interview, I asked him about the types of feedback that he received, and then he mostly focused on his advisor. So he said, honestly speaking, my advisor helps me a lot to improve my English, and by English he means like written English. He talked about how he sat with his advisor for 8 straight hours, and how that advisor gave him all these notes, and then he said, I wrote like 12 pages of notes on writing. Now that advisor wanted to know that student's background, what are the gaps, and then how to fill in those gaps. And because of that type of feedback that he received, that specific student ended up, before graduating, publishing at least 10 journals in high impact factor. So that was like amazing for the student. And the reason, of course, it's the type of feedback. Now the negative feedback, one of the participants was really I think right till the end until he graduated. He just said, I hate writing. And then I looked at the reason why it was that, because the type of instruction that were given to him back home, or even in his present situation, it wasn't really very, it wasn't helpful. So for example, I give you a quote here. This specific student had 2 advisors, so main advisor and 1 co-advisor. So he said, they usually give me 2 opposing feedback. So one advisor would say, he says, I received 2 different feedback. One feedback was, wow, you did a great job. And then that's very good writing. So I was happy. I sent it to the other, which he means the main advisor. Now, the 2 advisors, one of the advisors was American and the other one was international advisor. The other one said, I couldn't read it. It's very painful to read. And then he said he literally emails every single page in correcting grammar. He also talks about not really communicating with that specific professor. He would send him asking for feedback. That professor would not either email him back in 2 weeks, 2 months, or never. So he never really received any kind of feedback. So right till the end, this specific student really found it challenging to write his dissertation. And then the blended feedback, which was mostly, and interestingly, it was the female. Now, I called it blended because she talked about receiving negative feedback from her advisor, but the way she changed that into being positive is really interesting. So at first she said, and then I'm quoting from the feedback that she received from her advisor. It says, "You are lecturing people here. It seems you don't respect their intelligence or their knowledge in the field." Now, if my advisor would give me that kind of feedback, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, really. I can't, you know? I'm like, English is not my first language, and this is the type of feedback that I get. I'm out. But interestingly, this female student said, and she felt really uncomfortable when she was saying those words. And then she said, but you know what? I needed to succeed. I needed to finish my program. So she changed that negative attitude into positive and looked at, what does that advisor want from me? What does that teacher want from me? What am I doing wrong here? How can I change that? So she changed it into a negative attitude. Now, remember, that teacher never changed his attitude when he gave her that feedback. It was always negative, 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 right? But it changed when she started progressing in her writing, developing her writing. But because it was something internal, something within her that really, pushed her to continue. And continuing my findings, so what experience shaped multilingual STEM students thinking about academic writing? Students are adjusting as they write across this. Now, I remember those students only had experience writing within their discipline, so it's just engineering. In their first language, they never did any kind of writing. In their second language, which is English, no writing, except, and they called it, quote, research or science writing. So now they are put into a program where they have to write within a cross discipline. So, for example, one of the students is not just writing engineering. He is doing I think it was like a program sensor in medical field. So he had to write for journals in the medical field. Another student, which is an example here, she said, I'm studying biomedical informatics. So it's biology, medicine, and computer science. So it is typical to write. I need to decide what journal I'm going to submit. So I need to know, to think about the reader. Now, so the reader awareness is still there, but it's hard for her because she doesn't know anything about biology or medicine. I need to decide I'm going to submit. So I need to know about the reader. Okay, should I write more about computational complicated formulas and all that stuff? If it is more computational, I'm going to submit for more biology. So they will not read that part. So she's thinking of what part she should write. So it was really for her, it was what type of information they should include and what type of information they should not include. That she did not know. She didn't get any support to help her with that. Like, this is how you do, this is how you write across discipline. And how do students use strategies to help improve their writing skills? Two main themes came from this. Students created their own writing style through reading and using model papers. So throughout the interviews, I found that they did a lot of reading. That was their only way of getting through this. How do I communicate my ideas to my readers? I need to read. So they read a lot of journal articles. And they said that they had to read high impact factor journals because that's what their advisors, that's what their graduate program wanted from them. So they had to read that. But then again, remember, reading those high impact factor journals had a lot of jargon. So imagining those students navigating such journals. And then using model papers. I asked those students to bring model paper, a model paper that they think, well, okay, this model paper really helped me. And I found that the model papers they brought were simple language. It's in the engineering, but they were very simple language. They were able to use some parts of that, like say, for example, in introduction, part of that in paraphrase, they will look at that sentence structure and they will kind of imitate that sentence and put it in their own words, helping them. Or they would say, oh, I would look at part of the vocab and I would look at that vocab. How can I use that vocab in different contexts? How can I use that one, or give it another meaning? Students also describe thinking in one language and writing another. Now, one of the beneficial of being, international students is that you know two languages. So they were thinking in one language and then writing in another. It started first as just a mere translation. So they will look at the piece, they would translate it in Arabic, and then in their mind, they would read it in Arabic and then go ahead and write it in English. So they're going back and forth between the two languages. It's kind of like code switching between the two languages. Now, only one of the students said that as his writing improved, he stopped thinking in Arabic and just was thinking and writing in English and so on and so forth. The rest said, no, we still need it that way because that was the only way that helped us to understand how to develop our academic writing. And writing within academic, so the third and last question was, what influences multilingual STEM students' identity as writers? Writing within academic discipline influences how students think about themselves as writers. So the role of identity in academic writing, students' practices and experience with writing were only limited to their discipline and within certain contexts. Their interpretation of the writing as writers came from their interaction with scientific texts and scientific situations only. So they were not able to report on any writing experiences that are outside their writing. So they always said, when I asked them, they said, well, what kind of writer are you? I'm not a writer, I'm a researcher. They always looked at being a writer as like a fictional writer, of creative writing. But they never thought themselves like, no, I'm a researcher. Yeah, science researcher, that's it, that's who I am. And finally, students feel less empowered when comparing themselves to native speakers. So these students, I mean, they need to write in English. There is no other way, there's no other language they need to write in English, communicate in English. So they kept constantly comparing themselves to their colleagues, to their advisors, to their friends. And when I say colleagues, advisors, I mean American English-speaking students or friends. And that kind of really affected their self-efficacy. And really, it was kind of like a barrier for them to continue developing the writing, because like they would say, well, I look at my colleague and I do a lot of work. Yeah, I work 24 hours. He only works a couple of hours, but he does the research and I can't. Why? Because it's not really, he doesn't have that mindset that he says, I don't have that ability that American person has. So this is just an example. This is a quote. So one of the students says, he used to edit everything, talk about everything, and like every single mistake. So he would like to get like good writing. He wants to add his name on a paper, which is not writing, which is like he has written like in bad language, they say, or like very weak English. So we have to put more effort like when writing a paper than back in Iraq. Now this is an example of the effect of language on the student. He had to write because his advisor's name had to be on that journal. That was one of the reasons that he said that advisor really gave me feedback, because he wanted to put his name in that article. So the implications for that, I mean, there's a lot more, but I'm just summing up for 2 points here. So college supervisors, instructors, advisors, and faculty should not give high or put high writing expectations until they know and understand their multilingual STEM students' writing background and needs. Graduate departments should provide graduate multilingual STEM students with academic writing classes and writing workshops and prepare them for interdisciplinary writing instructions. And in doing so, they help them learn new writing strategies and practices that will help them overcome some of the struggles with writing. And thank you.
Okay. And Marty is going to take us into some final thoughts as we can pull together all of these 3 presentations. Sorry, this is a slow way to go, Marty.
Almost there. It's a good review, good summary. Really done.
So we would end hopefully with a conversation with you about what's to be gained by internationalizing your writing program. What would that mean if you were to internationalize some of your work? These are just ideas that we came up with in a hurry, things that we saw happen. Our program was taking on a deeper, more credible institutional presence and an enhanced reputation. We were seen as doing the big kids' work. Both Amy and I were successful in earning tenure and promotion at our universities, and this work factored into that. I'm not saying it was based on it entirely by any means. Amy in particular had big grants. We both had lots of articles that factored in as well, but it certainly didn't hurt us to take up the provost's challenge. We got to exchange local WAC knowledge with international WAC practitioners and researchers, and see the modes of and methods of research that they were using in their work. I think Amy and I were both privileged to see some of Jose's students' work on panels against the wall in your program. Things that your students were doing that was very impressive. We got to explore human relationships within and beyond our discipline. We got to do things that were surprising and humbling. And then we got to support communities of practice, our instructors, graduate students, and undergraduates. We would like to hear from you, any questions you might have for us, or any additions you might make to this list to flesh it out and make it more meaningful. We've already done perhaps.
And if anybody wants, these little mics so that people that are on Zoom can hear you.
How many Zoom people do we have? Do you know? At the moment.
We
where
don't have to worry about it.
We don't have to worry about this.
Forget the little mic.
That's good. Sure.
That is good. Yeah.
Please, go ahead.
I have a question, well, a couple of questions. I direct the WAC program in Appalachian State. I also direct the Writing Center. And, you know, one of the challenges in the Writing Center has been to get a diverse staff, you know, to have multilingual writers who see themselves as experts and others to see them as experts. And in the past, we've had more or less, we're not a very diverse campus in that way, quite diverse. And I've been looking into the Fulbright Scholar in Residence program as a possible model, but I don't know of other people in WAC programs or writing centers who've done that kind of model.
Are you thinking about a position that which you would go abroad in, or which you would bring to you?
We would bring a person to our campus, and what's program where you can bring somebody. Usually, though, you have to identify a person from somewhere who you might bring, and it's not, you know, if you had a type of appointment where they did some work through the WAC program with faculty development and maybe consulted in the Writing Center as part of their time, that would show the kind of expertise, you know, as a scholar in residence that I was hoping to attract. But it sounds like you all had other maybe easier ways to get funding. I mean, I don't know, like it happened on your campus in such a way that sounds like there was something already in place. So I guess my question is, you know, what are the funding sources for this? And does anyone have any experience with that Fulbright Scholar in Residence as a possible program?
I think your point is well taken, that there were other resources on our campus in place. If you think back to 1994, when Provost Deaton made this pronouncement, we must internationalize. So he was challenging the whole university, not just the writing across the curriculum program. So other people were doing other things that we could collaborate with on our own campus. I'm thinking though about the South African scholar who came to us. Our engineer, one of our engineers had been abroad and done some work in the engineering department at Johannesburg. He met this woman who directed their writing center. They developed a friendship and he invited her to come to our campus and we situated her in the writing program. So she met with faculty and students. She was very definitely she was white. She spoke British English because she was from the UK, but she was very definitely a diverse influence on the program. Amy, you were about to say something when I interrupted.
Yeah, I think when we've been able to partner with department chairs who are able to handle some of the purse strings and decisions that way, but they want to also join in some of these international partnerships. That's how the Literacies of Hope conference, it was obviously, funding streams coming from different directions. But I still remember having that conversation with him about, he wanted to make sure this happened and was going to put funds for that. So I think partly it's those partnerships we can get with people who do have the funds and can share those goals with us. Now, I will say just from even my current situation, I'm working with and helping fund, I think, 6 graduate students. Half of them are international graduate students. So knowing that they're bringing in different experiences, and one of the things that we have found really amazing is that we have started a WI certificate that students can apply for. So one of our students is helping teach our capstone course that's being offered that students have to complete as part of that certificate. So, we've developed the course as our writing program staff, but we are mentoring them, this one particular graduate student. And he's been doing phenomenal in working in that situation. So even though maybe he wouldn't be comfortable working as a writing center tutor, he is amazing as this instructor in this online capstone course. So seeing those opportunities, that's partly what we've been trying to do is, and then we have another student who's actually from Nigeria that works with us. And based on her interest in her scholarship, I reached out to the Black Studies department to say, she has that expertise. Is there a WI course that you would like her to work with? And instead he said, no, we'd like her to propose a course to teach. So again, it's just because of my work in campus writing program, I get to interact with people all across campus and see those opportunities where, oh, there's a possibility of a partnership.
And the Fulbright, I think, if you, I know IIE, so IIE National Institution of International Education, that's one of the organizations that brings international students as Fulbright. And then, so if you probably contact them and say, we're interested and this is the type of students that we need, you can actually post. But I think there's kind of like an agreement between you and an IIE, and how that works, I'm not really sure, because I used to be a Fulbright student when I first came to the US, and that's how really I wanted to continue my studies. And I went to Virginia in a Sweetbriar College, all women's college, and that's when I decided, you know what, I want to continue doing this. So it could start small with like a 1-year program, and that could really continue with bringing more international students to this.
Terry.
Well, it has been more or less, our last QEP was a global studies focus. And so there was some effort made. And it seemed like once the QEP sort of wound down and I kind of, was let go. And we used to have a good number of international students, especially at the graduate level. And I don't know whether that was COVID or policies with the last administration, but we have really seen a decline in that population. And I think it's to the detriment of our campus, that, and it doesn't help us to make the case that, well-educated students need to have lots of different people around them. And I think the people on our campus who sort of made that lip service claim, but without sort of a lot of apparatus behind, like, well, how do we make that change? I've been on 3 diversity task forces. We develop a report, we finally have an ESL Institute, like a thing that helps to orient different students to exchanges. But I don't think the scholarship exchange has really developed to that level. I mean, we do have exchange programs. They don't really focus on getting, especially diverse languages in on our campus. So, I mean, that's kind of like a long, rambling answer to answer your question. I think it matters for students. Yeah, and that's like matter. And I think once that's articulated, then you start building departments and making the connection. Well, we did just have, our university just did a new strategic priority document. And so it is a good time to remind them that they make commitments to things that have this in it. So I think, we're working on our own plan for the next 5 or 7 years. And I'll just put that in there, and that's my idea.
And part of my interest in doing this session topic this year was because we have also faced a sharp decline in the number of international students or, visiting scholars or whatever, because, a lot of things, but of course, topped off with COVID and things just had shut down really for that. And so we've really noticed that. I mean, it's been and even certain programs that we used to partner with on a regular basis, Asian Affairs Center, International Center, and others, that just stopped after. And then it seems like now we come back from COVID and just like, where are those people? Mm-hmm. Where's the director of that? What happened to the good work we had started, and then it just stopped. And so I'm needing myself to think about how to reinvigorate those or restart, have a new direction, but not let that opportunity to build these partnerships. Don't want to miss that.
I agree with what Amy is saying. And I also think that applying to bring a Fulbright scholar to you is a pretty good idea. I mean, you have nothing to lose by working on a proposal and asking those people. Every Fulbright workshop I've ever gone to on our campus is overly encouraging of our people to apply, whether it's you to go abroad or to bring someone to your campus. Insofar as the early days of our international activities is concerned, it got to be a real joke in our household. Every time I would go somewhere abroad, my husband would say, "Who are you bringing home this time?" Because I can look at the international places I've gone, and almost all of them, I've been able to have somebody come to our campus in return. Joe, you were going to say something, I think. Joe, I think you were going to say something a moment ago. Yes. Were you going to say something just a moment ago?
If not, would you be able to help them continue to facilitate this? And whether the documentaries, that development. I wonder if there's a writing.
I personally have somewhat reduced contact from what I used to have because of my retirement. But I do have with some, and certainly within the university, we have the South Africa program. Those people are in contact all the time. So it doesn't have to be just an individual knowledge. There are places and offices across campus that you can go to make some of those connections. And oftentimes I am told, if you don't have the connection for a Fulbright invitation, you can develop them. Get online and look at the website of the institution that might have some possibilities for you. Dig into their departments and see what their faculty are doing and start emailing with a couple of those and see what kind of email exchanges you come up with.
To the question about following up with our colleagues in China that we had worked with off and on, I would love to know where do they stand on those things? And when Marty was mentioning that, she had been kind of turned down from the curriculum she had been developing. Well, it was, I think, 2 years after that, I was invited to go to that very same institution and did, I don't know, week there of workshops. Nothing, I'm sure, as amazing as what Marty would have done, but it was something to kind of, again, get my feet in the door, mostly to see the colleagues that I got to know who had been at University of Missouri with us. But I would love to know then, what is the status for them? Because they themselves invited me in again, because they had had the relationship with both of us. And, to those two scholars, they were so hungry to make these connections, but I would love to know how are things going. So some of that is, yes, we need to reach out to them and see how they're doing. I will say that Thailand has been a regular partner. I have a colleague there even right now. The Prince of Songkhla University has really partnered with the University of Missouri, and those are wonderful when you can get that kind of steady partnership. I think the majority of their College of Education now comes from our university. So they've sent people over to study and then they've gone back. So that one I can speak to, but I don't know about our China connection.
Look to see who your university has memos of understanding with. We have signed MOUs with a number of different schools around the world. Ask your administration who you hold MOUs with and see if a part of those agreements includes faculty exchanges. And if you could get someone through that door. Anybody, I have lost track of what time.
It is 2:39, so we still have a couple more minutes, but.
Would anyone like to take this another direction?
I'll go ahead.
Well, it's been so good to have you join us. Thank you all.
Yes, indeed.
That afternoon time together, so.
No, thank you for coming at what's arguably a slow time of the day, perhaps, if you really got up early.
Yeah, I have to finish taking my notes here. These were good
Yeah.
ideas. Okay. All right. Thank you. I think they do all that. So that's what's nice about it. We don't have to worry about. Where did we put our clickers?
It's right there. It's right here.
One.
Well,
I know these things.
oh, no, I'm not. worried
Oh.
about that. I'm just. Let's forget 2013.
Well, you had a whole list of dates on there, right? All right.